We have breaking news from the NHL. We have the first coaching casualty of the offseason. The Sabres are making a change. Again, we'll discuss that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some breaking news from the NHL. The Buffalo Sabres have announced that they're relieving head coach Don Granato of his duties effective immediately, along with assistant coach Jason Christie and video coordinator coach Matt Smith. So obviously, I talked about in yesterday's video, there were some rumblings, which were not surprising, at least not to me, that there were some rumblings that the Sabres may be undergoing some pretty significant changes, which could include a coaching change. And here we are, just not even 24 hours later, it's happened. So obviously the Sabres played their final game yesterday. Their 82-game schedule is now complete. For the 13th consecutive year, they're out of the playoffs. Last year and this year, they did finish a little better in the standings than they had in a bunch of those years previous. But it's still not good enough. They still haven't gotten in. And this year, you could say, they kind of took a step back. Like there was really three teams in the Atlantic with Detroit, Buffalo, and Ottawa, all expected to take big jumps. And we knew that it was probably not realistic that all three could get into the playoffs because it just didn't seem real that between Toronto, Boston, Florida, Tampa, that two or three of them would drop off and fall out. Because that's the thing, right? Teams can get better, but you have to overtake another team and have them kind of regress at the same time to kind of, have the standings change. And that just, didn't seem realistic. But, I know there were some question marks around Boston, even though they continue to prove everybody wrong, and we should know by now not to bet against the Bruins. Some questions on Tampa. Is Tampa slowing down? Are they regressing? Was the Panthers was that real what we saw last year? Can they duplicate that in the regular season? Because they barely squeaked in the playoffs, but then went on a credible run. And all three of those teams, if anybody had doubts about any of them, proved everybody wrong. Whereas, unfortunately, the Red Wings they're still in the mix. They may or may not make it, but they're right there up until game 82. That's a good step forward. In terms of Buffalo and Ottawa, they did not build upon last year because they both got better last year. They both missed. I think the Sabres missed by, 1 or 2 points? The Senators missed, I think, by 4 or 5, something like that. But at least they were closer. And then this year, they both took steps back. And Don Granato is the casualty here. Now, is this deserving? To some degree, I do think that change is necessary. But I do think Kevin Adams as GM here can also, definitely feel part of the blame. Last year in the offseason, they really did nothing. They practically nothing. I thought after having some decent progress last year, and even though they missed the playoffs, it was marginally, they were so close, right into the last couple games, that maybe you need to find a way to add that one more piece that can help get you over. And, they didn't do anything. They didn't, so to me, that's on Adams. But I know I've heard a lot of the fan base clamoring that Granato needs to go, some questionable decisions and whatnot, but it's unfortunate because in this 13-year playoff drought, they've gone through 7 coaches. They're going on coach number 8 in that time frame. So that's less than a 2-year shelf life per coach on average. 14 years, 7 coaches would average 2 years a coach. They started, that goes all the way back to the end of the Lindy Ruff era. And of course, they had Ron Rolston, Teddy Nolan, Dan Biasma, Phil Housley, Kruger was in there for a while, and then Granato. So, a couple of those guys, in my opinion, were not the right pick. I don't think Kruger really ever fit. The other ones, you could probably question a bunch of them, to be honest. Phil Housley didn't seem to work out quickly, even though he was, had a ton of history as being one of the, greats of the organization on the ice, but he's better as an assistant coach, clearly. So, in 274 games under Granato's tenure here, he went 122, 125, and 27, so a little bit under 500. Going into next year, they have 13 players under contract and $22 million in space, so they have a bit of flexibility. I suspect this is not going to be the only change we see, given the fact that Adams is removing Granato as head coach. I think that definitely tells us that he's safe. At least I would think. I'd be shocked to see the GM removed later on. Usually you never see that. So this is going to be his second coach that he's hired. Of course, Kruger was a hire of Jason Botterill. Granato was hired under Adams, and now this will be his next coach. So usually when you get on to the second coach, the pressure starts to ramp up on the GM if you don't continue to see improvements and get results. So who's next? I don't know. Obviously, they're going to join a list of teams that are in the mix. This is the first firing at the tail end here of the regular season. Most teams haven't played Game 82 yet, so there's probably going to be a few more. But there's a bunch around the NHL that have interim coaches that have made changes throughout the year that are not really sure or quite likely to move on and go to a whole different coach again. So, like, we know Ottawa's doing that for sure because Jacques Martin was not brought in as a long-term fixture there. Obviously the Blues may go in a new direction. The Kings may go in a new direction. Like, there's teams out there. And if you're going to make a change, in my opinion, right now, there's lots of good candidates on the market. I would make the change quickly so you can jump into getting involved before a lot of these guys get picked over and get hired. So we'll see what happens. Who should be the next head coach of the Buffalo Sabres remains to be seen, but I would like to also see some other changes with this club as well on the ice. I think if they're going to take it a step forward next year, I certainly would think that Kevin Adams will make some on-ice changes as well. They could use a new captain since they traded Kyle Okposo, and we'll see what else they can do. But will next year be the year? It's not only do they need to get better themselves, but like I said before, the top 4 teams that have been at the top of this division for an extended time, is it realistic that, they're going to be regressing at all? Or how much better do these other teams really need to be to have a chance to climb into that top 3? It's not going to be easy. These teams have a lot to overcome. So let me know who should be the next head coach of the Buffalo Sabres in the comments. We'll talk further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.